Hello everybody, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program and welcome back to RP1. I apologize for the long delay since the last episode. As many of you may know, I have been focusing on a different game, and I have been loving making those videos. However, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be abandoning my KSP. So, thank you all for being patient and sticking around. We'll be doing some more stuff. We have plenty of footage to get through. So anyways, we're going to come back here and real fast, we're going to go through a launch. As you can see here, we have a couple different science nodes to research, as well as a plane and a rocket, the Dawnbreaker 2. I believe that's misnamed. That's going to be the Dawnbreaker 3.5, I believe. But this is just going to satisfy an optional contract to put an atmospheric analysis satellite into low Earth orbit. So we're going to do that. It was a fairly identical launch to the last one that we did, and so we're going to kind of speed through it, and then we're going to focus on a different launch for the rest of this episode. The Dawnbreaker that's being created right now doesn't have the science experiments on it, so we're going to add those before we launch. We've already done these science experiments, so we're going to have to force run it once we get there. But let's just cut straight to the launch day. Or launch evening, as I can say. Since this is a solar-powered satellite, we want it to get as much sun as possible. So we want its apoapsis to be on the sunny side. Therefore, we are launching in the dead of night. I'm skipping through a good portion of this footage because I did forget to put lights on the craft. So it was a very dark launch, unfortunately. But it did go fairly well. We have our RCS aligning us. We have our ullage motors firing and giving us the appropriate ability to burn our coasting stage. And then to finalize our orbit and finish it off, we have two Baby Sergeant clusters of 11 that really brute force the periapsis over. And then lastly, a couple spin motors will fire and cancel out a lot of that rotation, so that way the solar panels get a little more time in the sunlight than if they were going as fast as they were. So here we are. We don't really need much. We're going to actually be getting rid of this satellite as soon as we complete the contract. Since we have already run the experiments, we're supposed to force run them, and then that will allow them to complete the contract. So there we go. We have both experiments completed. We have a stable orbit, and there is the optional contract completed, bringing to a close the Light Satellites program. So let's go ahead and range safety this. We don't need the debris floating around, and the satellite can't provide us any new science experiments, so we don't need it. So we get back to the KSC and check out our KCT list, and we have, during the time of that launch, we had unlocked the next science node. I believe that was re-entry heating, so heat shields and stuff, which is going to be very important. So as we see here, we have completed all the required contracts for the early satellites program. We even did one of the optional ones, and we did it on time. We actually made it just before the deadline, which is very nice. We can complete the program right now. We'll get a little bonus. However, we are still getting paid since there's still some time. As far as our X-Planes go, we still have 2 more contracts. However, we have plenty amount of time and plenty of funding to go through before that ends. We have now unlocked the ability to have a flight officer and a chief scientist, 2 more leaders that we can choose from. I'm going to end up going with Chris Kraft and James Van Allen, but as you can see here, you can see all the different pros and cons to each leader. We go with Chris Kraft for his speed and efficiency in VAB integration, rollout, rollback, and launch complex efficiency gain. There is a penalty of 5% fund cost for pilot training. However, I find that to be a relatively okay negative for it. So now we're going to be looking into our chief scientist. And we end up going with James Van Allen because of his aggressive boost to science and the science that we're going to be investing in very soon, which is the lower branch of the tree. And so we're going to want to increase and get as much gains for that as possible. We're going to be headed to new areas, and those areas are going to have a large amount of science to begin with. So if we can increase it by 10%, that would be great. We are going to be taking a negative 8% speed to integration. However, our balance of our previous leader will kind of take care of that. So we're going to go ahead and grab him, and then we are going to finish up. And now we're going to be able to complete this program. However, as you can see, we're only a few weeks away from the deadline, and every day that you have a program active, you're still getting paid for it. So there's no real need to end it just yet. We still have a couple things in our build queue, so let's go ahead and time warp a little bit, get a few of those things passed, and then when the actual time for the deadline of the contract comes up, and then we'll accept it then. So it's still November. We can time warp again, get 1958 orbital rocketry done. Still have time. This is going to complete December 20th, which is just past the deadline. So as you see here, we made ourselves over to the 20th of December. Which means our program has been completed for 9 days, and we are no longer receiving funding for that. However, it goes and opens up our spot for the next one. Now, jumping right into the next launch, we have the Dawnbreaker 5, which is going to be a biological experiment. I apologize, I lost the footage for the build of this, and so I don't really have it, but it's just the Dawnbreaker 4 with a different payload on top of it. As you can see, we have a biological experiment, a parachute, a probe core, and then it's all topped off with a solid rocket booster to deorbit it. So we're going to go ahead and follow the launch for the most part. We're going to speed up most of it. It's pretty standard of a launch. We have to use a bunch of extra SRBs because the thrust to weight ratio upon takeoff was just abysmal. And so we made use out of the two versions of the casters we have available. We're tipping over ever so gradually because this doesn't really move that easily in this first stage. It is thrusting very heavily, however, it's kind of a boat, so we're only going to be pitching over by a couple degrees at a time. Go ahead and stage off the smaller SRBs. And I did many testings to find the appropriate amount of thrust to use, and this was honestly just the best version of it with the two large casters and the two small casters. So 15 meters per second. And then we stage them a little early to get them away from the rocket as quickly as possible. And now we have a little bit more control, so we can start pitching over a little more aggressively. We're going 5 degrees at a time. It's not the most efficient way to do this, but it's a way that has worked for me in all my testing. It doesn't require constant monitoring, so I appreciate that. I choose in the beginning via surface speed will determine how quickly I turn, but then eventually it goes to atmosphere. Once my apoapsis has reached the desired orbit, I pitch directly to horizon, and then I start my rotational spin. And very soon we run out of delta V, and we separate, and the spin stabilization works. We're a little too close to our apoapsis to do any kind of coasting, so we go ahead and kick on the second stage. And we keep burning, just trying to push out our periapsis as much as possible. And 50 meters per second to go. And we fire. We only have one baby sergeant, but we only need the one to get into orbit. And just like that, we have made it. And this biological experiment is going to be running. It needs 24 hours, a full day's worth of space-time to completely exhaust the science available. And we do need to recover it in order to gain any of that science. This is not an experiment where you can transmit via antenna. So that is why we have the SRB to deorbit it and bring it back. And we needed to get those science nodes out of the way, the ones that we were looking at earlier, because we needed a heat shield in order to survive re-entry. After all, there's a living creature inside that capsule. That spinning capsule, I'm sure it's quite motion sick at the moment, but as uncomfortable as it may feel, it will be much happier making it back to Earth alive. And the science gained from this particular experiment is quite great, and so I'm looking forward to all that we're going to be able to unlock with it and all the progress we're going to be able to make. Now, I didn't realize this until the actual launch itself, not the testing, but the actual launch itself, but I could have actually put that SRB in line with the rest of them. I didn't need to put it backwards because at my apoapsis, I am facing retrograde already, and so I could have deorbited at my apoapsis, which would have been a little bit more efficient. As it stands now, I'm deorbiting at my periapsis, which is fine. It will bring us back down. This thing has enough delta V to brute force our apoapsis down into suborbital trajectory. However, the angle that it puts us at is not the best. However, the heat shield should be sturdy enough to capture it. So as you see here, the apoapsis is coming down. It's about 350 meters or kilometers. And our periapsis is now in the negatives. We are coming back. But see, it didn't need to be this far. It didn't need to burn for this long. We didn't need to have such a steep re-entry angle. So if we were to be doing this again, I would probably say to have half the amount of fuel in that SRB, or position it in the appropriate direction to where we can deorbit from the apoapsis instead. But here we are. We have a heat shield to block the heat, and then the probe core, if the heat shield fails, the probe core will take the heat from there. Lastly, the parachute, hopefully that doesn't burn up because that will bring us home safely. And if all else fails, that's when the animal will perish. But hopefully none of that happens. Hopefully the heat shield can manage this angle of descent, and hopefully we can bring this animal home safely. I don't like that we're tipping back very much, but there's not really anything I can do about it. I do start to straighten out, which is hopeful, but then I start spinning a little bit farther, and I'm starting to come out of control just as the heating effects show up. So all is going well. It's frame rate leaves a bit to be desired, but then suddenly I start seeing the heat gauge on there, and I start getting very nervous. But before I could even really process how bad that would have been, the heating effects dissipate, and we start coming back down through the atmosphere. We are no longer in danger of exploding via heat. All that we are in danger of is exploding via impact. So hopefully we paid enough attention to our altitude of deployment for our parachutes and gave ourselves enough leeway that we can slow down enough. Thankfully, we are over the ocean, so we are going to be having a little bit softer of a touchdown than if we landed over land. I do have a habit of rating my parachutes fairly low. I don't like waiting around, going at 3 meters per second for a whole kilometer, so I do cut it pretty close when it comes to deployment of my parachutes. But thankfully they activated as expected and high enough that we are able to bring ourselves down to a safe landing speed. 4.9 meters per second is more than enough. Even if it wasn't, we have a full heat shield, probe core, and then parachute to go through before our experiment is damaged. But we didn't have to worry about that because we landed safely. And just like that, we will be able to recover this experiment and gain all the science back from a full 24 hours in space. So let's go ahead and recover this vessel, bring this creature home, and interview it about everything that it experienced. So we ended up with a whopping 61.1 science, and I couldn't be happier. We can unlock so many different things now. This is really going to push us forward, and as long as we can properly choose our programs and our missions and really pay attention to our funding, then we should be able to accomplish quite a bit with it. Let's go ahead and close up these screens, and then let's take a look at our research and development lab before we close out today's episode. I'd like to spend some of the science while everything is still fresh in my mind. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to want to unlock the next tech node for our X-planes, because that's going to be the way to move forward with that. We only have 2 more programs, both dealing with high altitude flight, so we're going to want to get the stuff to be able to take care of that. Also, I feel like we're pretty far behind on our orbital rocketry engine, so we're going to go ahead and get the 1959 as well. I'm thinking heavily about RCS control, but for now I feel like we have enough to handle the needs that we currently have. Solar panels, communications, and avionics are the next things I'm looking at. Avionics, I know instantly I'm going to want to get. Having lighter and more efficient avionics are going to be great. This one will give us deep space avionics, which is going to be good for moon missions. However, we're not quite there yet, so I'm not going to jump on that node. Taking a look at the communications one, that's very interesting. These are a little more expensive and a little bit bigger, so I feel like they have a bit more importance. However, I don't know how best to utilize a magnesium fairing is just yet. I'm going to take another look at orbital rocketry, this time the 1960, and I'm strongly considering just putting points into that as well, because we're going to want that eventually. Might as well while we have a massive amount of points. So we're going to put that into the 1960s orbital rocketry, and then we're going to come down here to the lunar range communications, because I think the next program I'm going to end up picking up is the satellite, early communication satellite program, which I figured would be good to help our program, our space agency in the long run. However, it ends up being a huge pain and a bane of my existence, and a mistake that we're going to have to eventually fix. But that is going to be for another episode. Thank you so much to everybody for being so patient with my Hydroneer offshoot for now. I'm very much looking forward to continuing that series, but I will be coming back and doing some more Kerbal stuff as well, some more RP1 as well as some more POV. I have plenty of footage to get through, so looking forward to that. But anyways, that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more RP1. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.